Hi class, and welcome to chapter 5. I want to talk to you about schemas and what schema is. This is the sign that we use for schema because it's your experiences that you've had throughout your lifetime. Normally what happens is schemas are developed from everything that you have viewed and been through in your life. It includes your culture and everything that you're about. That's what your schema is. If you have a broad schema, what typically happens is that you're more adept to other cultures, you're more knowledgeable about different social norms and other cultural expectations, and you're more just abreast on all of those different cultural differences. We have 5 categories that build your schema. You have physical, as well as roles, interactions, psychology, and membership. These are the different categories, and we'll go into each one. We're going to talk about physical. That means like things within our age group. Like we have similar experiences, people of my age group. Like I'm an 80s girl for myself. And I grew up in the 80s, so many movies and other social norms that occurred during the 80s, like quotes and different things. We all know those things from that age because of our age. Then there's gender differences, like I identify as a woman. So we have shared experiences of woman things, such as childbirth, disadvantages, discrimination, because we are women, those kind of things. The other things like being a heavyset girl versus being a thin girl. We have similar situations, similar things that we've actually gone through. So that's going to build up within your life. And you'll be able to experience that through your schema. Next thing is like roles. Like for myself, I'm a professor. My role is as a professor, I have to behave a certain way. I can't just stand up here and cuss at y'all and stuff like that. Maybe if I'm hanging out with my friends, I might have more intimate register and might cuss and stuff like that. But we have specific status that we have to represent based on what roles you view each person is. So if you have a student that is constantly answering and they keep adding to the lecture, that means that that student is not necessarily following the role as a student, but instead they're trying to take over and become like a teacher role. Also, if you think about a waiter, okay, there's this one restaurant called Dick's Last Resort. That place, the waiters are not typically the status quo of what we would think a waiter is supposed to be, nice and friendly. Actually, they are very mean and they're rude. And so it doesn't fit the norm of what we expect waiters to be. So it definitely affects you. And so all those different roles affect you in your life. So now we're going to talk about interactions. I just talked about like the situation with the waiter. When you have that interaction with the waiter, you expect them to be friendly. And if they're not, it's a conflict of what your own ideas were, your ideals for that day. If that person's not friendly, it might be that they just don't have a good match. They might not like their job. So it doesn't fit the interactions that we already expect. Psychology, when we talk about that, we're talking about your personality, your character. Like for example, myself, I am very bubbly. I am a social person, social butterfly, people would say. But there might be other people who are more introverted, more reserved. There might also be other people that look grumpy, but they're really not grumpy. But we perceive them as being grumpy. So psychologically, we think that those are those person's characteristics. We also understand that schema is affiliated with memberships, like for myself. I grew up with black people, so I associate with black people. but I'm still white-skinned. So I feel affiliation and a membership with them. I also grew up in and around a lot of Hispanics, so I understand that culture a lot, and I affiliate with that membership. I grew up as an Episcopalian, so that's the church I went to, so I'm used to those kind of traditions, so that's the membership I had. So whatever your affiliations or memberships are is what you identify with, and it becomes a part of your schema. Just like for myself, I played sports. You understand the ins and outs of the sporting world. You know how conflicts happen, how the game works, and all of that good stuff. So all 5 of those categories are going to help us understand how our schema is built, and we understand life and identify things better that way, and we can affiliate, and it makes us have a better understanding how we perceive life. It also helps us predict specific behaviors that occur. We'll know what that behavior is going to look like because we already have those set expectations based off of our schema and what we've learned. If you hadn't seen something or been a part of something, you can't necessarily judge it or have those expectations. So it helps us understand other people, other cultures, and that also helps greatly if you're able to learn about many more cultures. My experience and my brother's experience in the same household is going to be different because each person has their own schema, their own life experiences. So we'll all have a different schema. There is no two alike. Growing up in this specific culture is definitely going to affect us. So like for me, I escaped and I went with other cultures. I didn't want to stay in home. And I was better affiliated with the other cultures. I didn't want to be a part of my own culture at my own home. Now my brother, he stayed in our home a lot, and he developed his own set of ideas and his own schema based off of that. So we definitely have different schemas because of that. So we have these life experiences. We have those because of our parents, other adults, friends. All those people involved will help us develop also stereotypes, and we have to be careful about stereotypes. It happens as humans, that's just something that happens, but we have to also pay attention to those. It causes us to discriminate against a certain group of people. We can also have sexism, as well as ageism, as well as homophobic ideals. These kind of things all will cause oppression in minority groups or other specific cultural identity groups. For myself, my mom always said that deaf people were not functional and were not functional on a societal level, that they couldn't be successful. And I remember whenever she would talk about deaf people, she'd always say, poor deaf people. And I never understood why she would say these poor deaf people. And I noticed that they weren't really disabled, but deaf people as a whole do not view them as a disability. They view themselves as a cultural and linguistic minority. They see them as a cultural and linguistic minority. It's significantly different than being a disabled person. Most hearing people will view them from the pathological view, meaning that they're going to focus on deafness as a disability and that they are defective. Like, I remember when I married my husband and he was deaf, my mom said, how are you going to have a normal life? It's just not even possible. And I thought, okay, well, why can't we have a normal life? Everything seems okay. But I remember her telling me, no, that it wasn't possible because he was deaf and he was disabled. Many hearing people think that deaf people are disabled and they have more challenges and they can't live a normal life. And so I've seen more successful deaf people in the world than the other, per se, normal hearing folks out there. Remember, when you think about the pathological view, that pathological view a lot of time is the medical view, really depending on their hearing loss, looking and focusing only on their disability, not as a person as a whole. They are identifying them as a disabled group, and that they want them to become normal, or that they want to become normal. And they also think that deaf people want to be fixed, and that they should be fixed, and that they want to fit into normal hearing society. With the pathological view, they discourage sign language. They do not want people to use sign language because they do not view sign language as a real language. They also think that if you sign, it will cause you to be ignorant or stupid. They also think that you will be lower functioning in society and you will never be successful. But we know this to be not true, but there are a lot of hearing people out there that believe this of deaf people. They also do not want deaf people to marry deaf people because they're afraid that it's going to promote a deaf gene to where it would promote more deaf children. So people that believe in the pathological view want deaf people to marry hearing people so that they can assimilate better with the hearing world. They do not want them to be affiliated or associated with the deaf world. Hearing people also think within the pathological view that deaf people are lesser of people in society. They are oppressed, and they cause institutional oppression. So what happens is that you have this group of people, right? And society looks down on this group of people, but not only looks down upon them, but they also oppress them. So if you hear people talk about the social media and they talk about deaf people as a whole, typically they will call them hearing impaired, which is a disabled label. They do not see them as a cultural minority. They do not see them as a linguistic minority. They're focusing on their non-functioning body part. What's unfortunate is that we have two different kinds of oppression that actually causes internalized oppression, because what happens is that people hear the two different kinds of oppression, they feel like hearing people have more opportunities, and since I'm oppressed in my group and other people in my group and my cohort are also oppressed, so therefore I believe in oppression, I'm going to be oppressed. And then they actually believe that they can't succeed, and they believe what other people say about them. They also, within that group, they become more marginalized, and they will separate into smaller groups, just like people who are gay or people that have AIDS or people that have a specific label to them. And then they have their own oppression within the group, because they're not the same as the majority, and a lot of times they'll believe what the majority, like what the hearing people are saying, because they internalize the oppression. Because if everybody's saying it, then obviously it has to be true. The other information I want to talk to you about is autism. Autism is the hearing people that actually oppress deaf people. We also have deaf people that oppress each other, but we're going to talk about hearing people that oppress deaf people. So maybe you have a person that learns sign language and they want that job, but the hearing person goes and gets the job because they have more leverage than the deaf person, and so they go and they steal that job. And so this is occurring more and more all the time. People are learning sign language that are not skilled or qualified, but they're earning money from that where the deaf people are not. And so that is a form of autism. Also, people believe that autism, those people that actually promote autism, they believe deaf people are not on the equal playing field with the hearing people. It's very similar to sexism or racism or all of the ism groups. It's the same concept. Unfortunately, for many, many years, we have benefactors. The benefactors cause quite a bit of oppression. Some of those benefactors were voc rehab people, instructors, interpreters, because what happens is they view deaf people as needing to be fixed and helped and solving their problems, but not allowing deaf people to actually stand up for themselves and empowering deaf people or letting them actually fight their own wars. Instead, they take charge and they do everything for deaf people, even when deaf people have not asked them to do so. Benefactors, sadly, think that they're actually helping deaf people, but really in the same process, they're actually oppressing that minority. Benefactors want a lot of praise from the deaf community, but deaf people don't feel that praise is worthy because they don't feel pitied and they don't want all this help. And the benefactors just automatically do these kind of things, but they want that for their own self-motivation, their own thing to try to fix and help the poor deaf people out there. But really it's causing autism and oppression within that group. Now, there are several deaf people that do not want to become hearing, but there are so many hearing people that really feel that to be a hearing person, it's better than being a deaf person. But there are a lot of deaf people that think, no, there's nothing wrong with my hearing loss. It's my identity. It's what I affiliate with. I don't need to be a part of the hearing world, and I want nothing to do with it. Yeah, I've gone through several of these slides. I already talked about it. Okay. Now, autism affects deaf people by ambivalence, fatalism, or passivity, horizontal hostility, and benefactors are perfect, and then dependence on the benefactors. Now, when we talk about fear freedom, I'm going to go into each one of those categories, okay? Deaf people will develop low self-esteem when they see benefactors like the hearing people out there doing what they are doing while the oppression happens. What happens is, well, they'll believe that the hearing person knows all, and they feel like, okay, since I'm deaf, I'll never be successful. I'll never be able to develop what I need to develop, so they don't believe in themselves. Deaf people also will start having a negative view on life. They start actually believing all of the labels that people give them. And so they sadly become very cynical. And that's all they believe. Deaf people also feel that they want to change the world, but they feel like it's not possible because it's the mountain, the challenge is too high. They can't climb over that mountain. It's very fatalistic ideas, or fatalism, you would call it. Horizontal hostility, what that means is you have your group of deaf people, and you see one deaf person that's actually doing really well. Other people will start to see that and they'll get mad. They don't want that person to succeed because they want to succeed. So they start to climb and try to take down that person. The same concept is from the crab theory. If you have a bucket of crabs and they're all inside and they're trying to escape, right? And they're trying to climb out of the bucket. If you have one trying to crawl up, the other one will see it and they'll pull it down and they'll get on ahead of that. And so they just constantly pull each other down as they're trying to crawl out of the bucket. So horizontal hostility is extremely similar to the crab theory. They see a person being successful and other deaf people will bash them. This occurs, unfortunately, in the deaf community. Many deaf people also think that if that hearing person has said something, they have to be right because hearing people know everything. They think because they're the majority, hearing people know everything and that deaf people do not know as much. It's not true, and I've seen it happen though. A lot of times with parents that have deaf kids, they'll tell them a lot of different things and the deaf kids believe it to be true, and then they realize later that their parents had lied to them or told them falsehoods. I've seen this often. Sometimes deaf people will be extremely dependent on the benefactors. They will listen solely to them. They will have negative self-thoughts and they'll depend solely on that person. And it also causes hearing people to actually control deaf people's lives. In several situations this has occurred. And then of course it promotes oppression more in the deaf community. And it promotes the helper behavior in our community. They also give them a false sense of helps, thinking, oh, okay, I can't do anything because that person's going to help me. That's the only way I can succeed. I can't do anything unless that person helps me. So we just continue this 6-6 cycle of always needing help because they couldn't do it themselves. When that oppression happens, they have fear for freedom. They have fear to actually have interdependence. They're afraid to try to succeed by themselves. They're afraid to talk up and talk back because they've seen all of these things and they've been surrounded by negativity most of their life, so they don't know how to get away from it. Now we understand in the deaf community, we know that it's a cultural and linguistic minority. We know that their experiences have been with several bad experiences with hearing people. And we have to understand that there are deaf people that do not like hearing people. They actually hate them and they have problems with them because they've gone through all of these horrible things. They might have had parents who pitied them or their parents ignored them. Maybe the parents didn't communicate with them at all. So they might be damaged from that and hate hearing people as a whole. That happens in our community. We have to understand those experiences and what they have faced with autism, and they experience autism all the time. We don't, as hearing people, typically do not have that against us. We do not have those damages that occur with us. We have a different schema, and we have to understand that those stereotypes and those beliefs are out there, and we have to understand ours as well as recognize other people's. We have to realize that they do have their own language and their own culture, and we must respect that. We have to respect their experiences and what they have gone through as a community and as a minority. For deaf children, the best role models are deaf adults. Reason being is because they have that same shared experiences. They understand the trials and tribulations of being a deaf person, how it feels firsthand. they understand all of those different things, and their schemas are going to be very similar. Just like for myself, I was in a part of the black group, with black people. My skin is different. I did see things. I understand the culture a lot. I did have some discrimination occurred with me, but I was not black-skinned every day. I am looked at as a white person. They're looked as a black person every day. And we can't change that. I can maybe have a shared experience, but I can't say I identify. I can say I understand the culture. Like for myself, I have hearing loss. I struggle all the time with my own problems, but I have not been oppressed because I'm a different person. I was raised as a hearing person. I don't have those same struggles as a deaf person has had. So I don't identify as being deaf. The deaf community, they want to focus and look at us as professionals, as allies for the deaf community. We have to make sure we're promoting and definitely not taking away from the deaf community, but we're promoting it and we are a strong ally for them. I want you to think about a couple things. I want you to think about your own discrimination, your own bigotry. You have it. We all have it. It's in there. You have it as humans. We all have it. Maybe if you had some oddest behavior, change it, stop it. And also look for ways to empower the community. And why would you seek power? And what's your motivation behind it if you're seeking power and you want power? Also, think about your own things that you have experienced. Maybe someone discriminated against you. Maybe you've seen discrimination. Maybe you were involved with discrimination in some sort. Think about how that's made you who you are. Remember, you have a role and responsibility in this community as this minority. You are involved and a part of the deaf community now, and you have a responsibility to uphold. And remember that, and remember to avoid being an autist. That's all for chapter 5. Thank you.